Hey everyone, and welcome to a new Digital Foundry Direct filmed on location at Redmond, no less, the home of Microsoft. Well, we're actually at Bellevue, the home of Valve, but let's not split hairs. Point is, we've been invited here by Microsoft to take a look at the Xbox Series X some months before its eventual release, holiday 2020. You know who I am. This is, of course, Mr. John Linneman.
Yep.
And Xbox Series X, where do we begin? Well, I think with this particular DF Direct, we've already talked in another video about the core specs and the vision. Here we're going to be talking more about our kind of impressions, our hands-on with the actual hardware.
That's right.
And what do you reckon?
Oh yeah, we get to go into this lovely sort of lab environment,
Right.
And sort of see how the console's put together, take it apart, put it back together. They actually had all the components sort of stripped down into individual components.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to see the split motherboard design, the way that stacks on, and then the vapor chamber cooler clips on there, and the optical drive, and I thought that was a really interesting demonstration. It kind of gives you that extra appreciation of the industrial design because it's very different from a typical console. And
Sure.
I think, that vertical stack design they went for was specifically designed with cooling as sort of like the key element. They needed to find a way to cool the system, considering the sustained clocks that they're pushing on this thing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was absolutely fascinated by it. I mean, the whole concept of a console has been kind of redefined by the need to push so much power through a relatively small slice of silicon. And this requires innovation in design in terms of the form factor of the console. And I think what I like about it most is the fact that, well, there's in the wake of the initial reveal, there was a lot of talk about the PC Mini Tower, and I think it's not anything like a PC Mini Tower, really. It's way too small. It's much smaller. And the closest analogy we can come to was come up by this man.
It's two GameCubes stacked on top of each other without the duct tape.
Without the duct tape, but it is two GameCubes stuck together.
Two GameCubes stuck together.
And we kind of mentioned that to Microsoft, and there were some chuckles. But that's kind of like the form factor that you should be thinking about in your head about how Series X actually sort of looks. And we've got some shots here that show how the system compares to the Xbox One X here. And I think what's fascinating is it's a continuity in design.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they use the same kind of materials, similar color scheme. They have the same kind of power and buttons and the pairing button, and everything about it looks very, very similar, but obviously the shape is completely different. I liked stacking the Series X on top of the Xbox One X, and depending on which side you're looking at, there really is an interesting size difference between the two. So it is a very different machine. But I like how the thing about the Series X, and I guess it was kind of true of Xbox One X as well, is it feels like a very dense machine, very heavy, weighty, but solid kind of feeling system.
Yeah. The air kind of gets sort of pumped in from the bottom, goes through the system. Now, here's the thing that I just find absolutely incredible is when we sort of build a PC, airflow, a lot of it is defined not just by having inlets and outputs, so to speak, for the air to sort of travel through. You kind of want physical air space in there. There's nothing in there. It's airtight. Everything kind of goes through the design, and it's packed in there, absolutely packed. Reaches the top. It's like 130 millimeter diameter
fan.
And then it goes straight out of the top. But we also had it on its side, and it seemed to work just fine there.
It is interesting at the top there when they first revealed the system. Everybody kind of assumed that there was a green LED light shining from the top, but it isn't actually that. It's a sort of a variable thickness piece of plastic that sort of gives it an interesting green tinge.
Yeah.
So which in retrospect, actually, that kind of is maybe the better choice, because having a large green LED shining vertically may be a little bit distracting.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating design though, and sort of going back to the construction phase of it, I had the chance to actually take all of the individual components and see how they kind of slot together. So you can kind of see here with our cutaways how that kind of works, how we have these two main boards, like the Southbridge board and the SoC board, and they kind of clamp together on the sides of the heat sink.
Yep.
And then basically the power supply, the heat sink goes on, vapor chamber.
The vapor chamber cooler clips to it. Everything sort of clips into place very tightly,
Yep.
and then the optical drive slots in.
Yep.
You know, everything sort of, and then you have to kind of slide it into the case.
Yeah, so obviously in China, where they're going to be fabricating this thing, it's all robots that are going to be physically constructing this device and slotting everything together. And to help us to kind of construct this by hand, we had some helper magnets in place.
Yeah, so for this specific unit, they had some extra magnets to kind of hold things in. So that's, you know, it's kind of fun.
Yep. So let's talk about the actual machine itself. Again, we kind of just mentioned that right now, that the kind of the quality of the materials, the finish, the plastic, it really is a match for the Xbox One X, to the point where we physically put the two units together. They're very much of the same family, and it really sort of you can kind of see how close they are, the shots here, and the physical dimensions of the machines. The length of the Xbox One X is kind of like the height of the Series X, I think.
Yeah, actually, you're right. They are the same, I guess, width, height, however you want to put it. And then, you know, obviously, depending on that angle, it's either wider or thicker, or, you know, they're so different. It really is a very different design.
Yeah.
I'll be very interested just to see how the other next gen console compares to that, because it seems like they again, this is very intentionally designed to move air. They moved to this sort of vertical design specifically to solve the problem of, you know, running those chips at those extremely high clocks compared to what we typically see in the console space.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like it was a necessity to build it this way.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about the SoC for the moment here, we've got some nice shots of the board there. I mean, it is a high power component, so we've got 360 square millimeters on the die there, and the clock for the GPU is 1825 megahertz.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know, if we look back historically, even Xbox One X, the clock of the GPU was significantly lower than a discrete graphics card of the same family from AMD. But this time, the game clock of a 5700 XT is kind of ballpark with what they're doing on you know, running the Series X SoC flat out. So they're really pushing here. They're pushing hard, and this is kind of why we've got this design, this innovative design, yeah, absolutely fascinating. I mean, I was talking to them about the kind of stress tests that they put the final design through, and you know, they're talking about, well, you know, who's going to be playing Xbox Series X in a box in a desert? But that's the kind of material, that's the kind of conditions, the conditions that they kind of stress test this thing, and they only have like 6 months to test the final design before it's on the shelves, or before it goes into full production, I guess. So, you know, they've kind of got to move to the absolute extremes there to kind of really stress the system.
Then another thing, I guess, when you flip the unit around, there's obviously some changes that can happen to this thing over time, but the big thing was the slot for the SSD.
Right.
We actually get to sort of play with one of those. And so the expandable storage, obviously the whole NVMe system, it needs to reach a certain level of performance that's sustained in order to correctly match the specifications. So you can't just plug any drive in. So they have this specially designed sort of micro card looking drive. It's like basically an NVMe in portable form that you sort of slot into that back slot. It sort of sticks out. It's almost like a memory card from the old days. But it's a really nice mechanism. You kind of stick it in and out, and it's, obviously I would love to have seen that type of format as the actual medium for the physical versions of games, but the cost, that would be incredible. That would be so great though, having this little because this thing is weighty too. That little, I suppose it's the cooling, sort of the heat sink of the unit itself. But it's a really solid piece of metal.
Well, obviously in the PC space, we have NVMe drives, and we have motherboard manufacturers putting these pretty substantial heat sinks on the boards to keep the drive cool, to sustain performance. That isn't really what you can do in a console, so they've actually had to integrate the heatsink into the actual design. I think what I love about it is that the form factor of the NVMe drive, I mean, we kind of think of NVMe as a kind of quite a long stick, but it's built on the 2230 format.
I think so.
Something like that. But it's very, very short is the key takeaway here. It's it's very weighty in the hand, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a first party thing, but it seems like they partnered with Seagate for it. You can actually see that sort of etched in the back here.
Yeah, so Seagate are the partners for providing the expanded storage. So these little, they're kind of like little cards. I wouldn't really call them cartridges, but you can actually copy all your games to one of these expandable storage devices, and then you can take it to another machine, which is quite, if we think about how expandable storage works on Xbox One, it's similar to that. But if we think about how expandable storage works on PS4, it's not quite the same. But yeah, it's fully portable is the point.
And due to the shape, it actually makes it easy to conceivably have multiple cards.
Yeah.
I mean, not that they're going to be cheap, I'd imagine, but if you had 2 or 3 of these cards over time, sort of slotting them in and out, it's much more convenient than messing with an external USB drive.
Yeah.
Although the system does still support USB drives, but it's either for running Xbox One or other backwards compatible games, or you can use it to store the newer Series X games on it. So, but you can't run it.
No, it's a backup mechanism.
It's a backup drive.
Yeah.
So you don't, you download it, you can back it up there. I don't think there's any details yet on how it's going to work. Like they didn't really have anything to say in that yet, but it does at least sound like you can kind of park your games there, since obviously the SSD space is going to be premium.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is just going to be as the dashboard works now, where you copy stuff to
probably
external storage, and it's just it's just a standard thing. But yes, you can run your Xbox One and 360 titles from an external drive. There will be a speed penalty, obviously, compared to But the SSD, I mean, obviously you probably would have already seen the stuff about the quick resume, which I think is, I can't really stress enough how awesome that is when you actually see it. Because obviously we read about it in Microsoft's blogs and communications, but when you actually see the ability to seamlessly switch between games and go straight back into the action.
So the key is that it actually, first of all, we've had the suspend options this whole generation.
Right.
It works well on PS4 and Switch, but it never really worked very well on Xbox. Well, what we saw here is that not only does it work this time, it supports, of course, multiple games, and that seems to vary depending on the size of the game. But we saw at least 4 different games. I think they did.
Yeah, I think
there were some BC titles in there though.
Right, that's right. I mean, they don't actually have any Xbox Series X games.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So all of them are going to be.
They were all 360 games.
360
sorry, they were
Xbox
One
X
games. Forza 7, Hellblade, and a couple others as well.
Yeah, there was a 360 title in there.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah. But you'll be able to see all of that in the footage.
But I guess the key there is that they also had stressed that this works over reboots and firmware updates. So if you do system updates or you just restart the console completely, the state is still stored, so you can kind of come back to it. So that is interesting and very different from the suspend mode that we currently see on all the other consoles this generation. Yeah,
so I think sort of rounding off the SSD side of the equation, the solution does seem to be sort of complete. We had big concerns, if you've been watching previous directs, about how SSD would actually work. And it seems that the solution is expandable storage via these little memory cart-like devices that are actually high-performance SSDs. I guess from our perspective, the big question is going to be cost, because I can't see these things being cheap. A 1 terabyte NVMe drive now in a flash sale on Amazon is like $100.
Yeah, it's not going to be cheap. I mean, I don't think so. But it can change over time, and the system can support larger than 1 terabyte. So down the line, they could introduce, 2, 4, whatever terabyte cards. So there's no limit there. Because I guess storage space is the big thing for this type of fast storage. We can't see a massive increase in space out of the gate.
And I guess we should also talk about the new controller.
Yeah, we got to play with the new controller, and it's so I guess they kind of they've opted to sort of refine rather than like completely replace, and that's fine. So I think the Xbox One controller is really good as is. This one they've slightly shrunk just the tiniest little bit and sort of shaved off some edges. I kind of went back and forth between the old and the new, and it does feel slightly more comfortable in the hand. Especially the big thing for me was that the bumpers feel they're more enjoyable to use because like I always felt like they were a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
Especially on the first gen Xbox One controller, the S whatever I guess update was a little better that way, and this is also further improved in that regard. They also added a lot of the ridges and the little what is it like? That's sort of that texture that the I guess the Elite controller has. So that's they added it on the bumpers and on the triggers, and also a little bit on the grips, I think. And then of course there's the D-pad. So they sort of came up with a solution that's sort of halfway between the metal disc that you could install on the Elite, as well as the more traditional like cross D-pad.
Yeah.
Sort of sits somewhere between that, and it feels it's very crisp and clean. The directions still feel like very solid, but you have a nice roll between them. So I really am interested to really put that to the test and see how it stands up.
Yeah.
Then I guess the final thing for me was the not a huge deal for me, but it's the share button.
Right.
So obviously that's been a thing on PS4 and Switch, but on Xbox to share you always had to sort of go through a shortcut command, and now they've obviously added the dedicated button, which curiously it's kind of the same position as the third top button there on the Elite controller.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's in the same position there, and so it kind of just fits in naturally.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really nice refinement on the original design.
Yeah, I think, hopefully we've got some B-roll here where you can see the evolution of the different controllers here, and they actually prepared this for us to
get an idea. That.
Yeah, of the evolution from the original Duke, the monstrous controller for Godzilla, all the way. You can kind of see how things are becoming sleeker and more refined across the generations until we have the new controller for the Xbox Series X even.
I like how the D-pad, like you look at it now and it's very geometric with sharp edges, where that original Duke D-pad just looks like somebody poured melted plastic on the...
Yeah, so I think what was quite interesting there, because on the face of it, there isn't a revolution here, is there? There's no big idea. There's no... there's been a lot of talk about Sony's patents with temperature sensors, biometrics, and
well, I guess actually to think about it though, another thing that they've put a lot of effort into the latency stuff, where the controller can react more quickly. But what's interesting to me is that it's not inherently a thing with this new controller. They noted that you can update the firmware on Xbox One controllers to, when used with Series X, to enjoy the benefits of the reduced latency and the different polling, the way that they're handling controller inputs now. So you actually should see a benefit in terms of input response on both the new controller and all the other ones as well, which is a cool feature.
Yeah, I'm really going to be interested to test that out, because they were talking about the radio being more, better synchronized with the console.
And they also noted, by the way, the new controller works on Xbox One and the PC, of course. So it's fully compatible across the line, which is, I think that's I'm glad that they've kept that up, because I think that's kind of, using console controllers on the PCs kind of a thing now. And it's nice that it's also backwards compatible with the previous console.
I think what I thought was kind of most amusing was that they actually had photography of how people use the...
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of like bizarre...
Yeah, some of the grips, like you have the two fingers, like one hand for both analog sticks, and then the other hand like this.
Yeah, I mean, it was part of messaging they wanted to give to us, which was that fundamentally Xbox fans don't think that the controller is really broken in any way, so why fix it?
Right.
And they were kind of demonstrating that people are so used to the design that they've got all manner of, how can we say, personalized
yeah,
ways
exactly.
of contorting their fingers to access all of the buttons at one point. But I think that's kind of fascinating looking at that board again to see that it is a continual process of evolution and not really any revolution as such
That's right.
from the beginning. So yeah, interesting. But you know, in terms of the materials, in terms of the way it feels in the hand, I don't think there's going to be too many complaints there. I guess the question is really how Sony are making a big deal about their controller and how it innovates. And I'm going to be interested to see how that compares to the standard Xbox offering there.
Yeah, and I mean they haven't changed. They also haven't changed the rumble. So
Yeah.
you still have the rumble triggers and the typical, like the standard rumble that's in the current controller. So they didn't try to do anything with, I guess, HD rumble. Though I guess the triggers themselves are already kind of moving in that direction. But yeah, they haven't modified anything there. So it really is just an evolution on an original design, which it's fine by me. I mean that was PlayStation 1 through 3 was kind of the same thing. Just sort of an evolution with some slight features added over time.
Yeah.
Or taken away in the case of Rumble, which was restored. But
Yeah, so it's kind of like an outline of everything we saw about the physical form factor of the machine. I guess we could talk quickly about HDMI 2.1 because that's explicitly confirmed that they're all in on HDMI 2.1.
Yeah, that's true.
And 120 frames per second was part of the latency reduction measurement because the screen updates twice as quickly. And they kind of want you to automatically set your console to 4K 120 if you have a 120 hertz mode available via HDMI 2.1. So yeah, interesting stuff there.
It's a nice looking box, unconventional but interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I just kind of think we need to move away from the thought that it's a PC mini tower because it really isn't. It's just a new spin on the console, and I kind of like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something different. I'm happy to see that. So, yeah,
good stuff. Right, okay, well, let's wrap this one up then. If you enjoyed the content, like, subscribe, share. That's always very important. Ring the bell, of course, for instant notifications whenever we post new Digital Foundry content. Please consider the DF Patreon if you enjoy what we do and want to support us more directly. But for now, from me and John in Redmond, Bellevue, wherever, thanks for watching.